Another episode of Game of Investing podcast. Indian spirits market is on a high. I mean literally. Now, there are not many global brands that India has created since independence. Now, that trend has been clearly broken. The last 3 to 4 years, Indian single malt whiskies has been accepted and awarded the best single malt whiskies in the world by the leading industry experts. Not just one brand, so many Indian single malt whiskey brands are creating waves out there. Now, what has changed? What is this new trend? That's a case study for today's podcast, where we are going to delve deep into Indian spirits industry with focus on whiskey and single malt whiskey. What are those brands? Which are the companies and businesses that are catering to this kind of a huge booming demand out there? Before I start, let me ask you a trivia question. Which do you think is the most lucrative whiskey market out there in the world? If you think it's United States or Ireland or Scotland or Japan, it's wrong. It's India. According to Edinburgh Whisky Academy, India is the largest spirits consumer in the world. And take this, 1 out of 2 whiskey bottles sold globally is sold in India. Now, that's a terrific statistics. Unlike other Asian countries where beer dominates, in India, whiskey dominates. Spirits dominates, especially whiskey dominates. India overtook France in 2022 as the largest Scotch whiskey consumer in the world. Take this, the Scotch whiskey exports to India has gone up almost 3x in the last 1 decade. That's a booming industry I'm talking about. Now, when it comes to single malt whiskey, it's growing even faster than Scotch whiskey. Scotch is growing at 8%, whereas single malt is growing at 13% compounded annual growth rate. According to Statista, Indian market, that is India, is expected to consume 6 billion liters of alcohol in 2024. That's quite a lot of catching up for a per capita demand. The revenues expected from the spirits market is approximately $33 billion. The alcoholic industry per se is $33 billion, just behind the United States, Japan, and China. So India is the fourth largest alcoholic market in the world and the largest spirit market in the world, especially whiskey. Now, whiskey's revenue, the revenue generated from sales of whiskey in 2021 was around $18 billion. It went up to $21 billion in the last couple of years and is expected to touch $30 billion in 2030. Indians consume roughly 260 million cases of whiskey, and out of which only less than 8% is non-molasses based. Rest 70, 80, 90% is molasses based domestically made Indian whiskies. Now, things are changing as we are talking. Now, before we go deep into it, let's understand the history of how the alcoholic industry and the distilleries started in India. Whiskey's history harkens back to 19th century when India was ruled by British and India was a colony. And in 1828, when British entrepreneur Richard Dyer established the first liquor distillery in India. They created the first distilleries and the liquor brands, and they were termed Indian Made Foreign Liquor, IMFL. And in 1800s and to a greater part of 1900s, there were no Indian brands that were catering to the people in India. That too, especially, there was one brand which was called Mahua, and it was banned, being termed as dangerously intoxicant. In 1870s, it was banned by the Bombay Abkari Act. So there were no prominent Indian brands, Indian whiskies until independence, and there were no Indian whiskies or any Indian liquor brand that was famous globally until 2010-2015 time frame. So there was almost a 200 years of gap where none of the Indian brands were in even existence for that matter. Foreign brands basically dominated the global spirits industry. Especially when it comes to India, the foreign brands dominates the Indian spirits market and whiskey market. Pernod Ricard, Diageo are the global number 2, number 1 players in the world, and they kind of have more than 60-70% market share in the spirits market. Diageo and Pernod Ricard, through organic and inorganic expansion, is kind of dominating the world with their market share in the spirits world. But that trend is kind of broken in India, especially the whiskey brands, because India's whiskey brands has risen to prominence, global prominence, in the last 3 to 4 years. Indri, for example, that was just launched in 2021, has become the best whiskey in the world in 2023. its Diwali $420 special edition won the Best Whiskey of the World award in 2023. And since its launch in 2021, Indri has bagged almost 14 international awards. It's not just Indri. There is Rampur, there is Godawan, there is Kamath, there is John Paul. There are so many brands out there that is creating waves in the Indian spirits market. Pernod's Glenlivet, volume grew almost 39% in 2023 in India and has been dethroned by Amrut as the leading seller of Indian single malt in India. It grew almost 183% as per Eurodata Monitor. And there's a new dawn for single malt in India. When it comes to single malt, it has 53% revenue share of the total whiskey market. And out of that 53%, 30% is dominated by Indri as a brand. Now, some history and provenance to the single malt itself in India, how they all started. Well, it all started in 1996 when John Paul launched its first edition of single malt whiskies in 1996. This was like 32 years back. And Surinder Kumar is considered as the father of the single malt in India. He has the palate to create the best single malts out there. Amrut was created by Surinder Kumar. He is called the master blender for Amrut, and now he has went on to start his own company. Well, we'll go into that. But here is some history. Amrut was created in 2004, so it wasn't famous until next 20 years. Then Radico Khaitan is another famous Indian company that created Rampur brand, that is single malt whiskey, in 2016. Then Kamath was born in 2021. So now you see a series of new brands coming up and catching the new wave of single malt whiskey dawn in India. Seeing this new trend where the domestic players are becoming leading global brands, Pernod and Diageo slightly changed their strategy for India. While Pernod, India is one of the 4 focus countries other than Japan, China, I think US. India is one of the 4 focus countries for Pernod's market. And what Pernod did is they launched a brand called Longitude 77, which is named after the line of longitude that runs from north to south of India. And Diageo also adopted a strategy where they launched Godawan, which is a local brand. So these two companies are now making in India the spirits for India. The single malts are made in India for India, but they belong to the revenue share of Pernod and Diageo. Now, Pernod has almost 47%, almost half of their revenues coming from emerging markets. That's why, India is one of the focus countries for both these markets. So what are the 2 factors that is primarily driving this new trend of whiskey market in India, especially single malt? Well, first one is drive towards premiumization and luxury consumption. So when it comes to India, there is a rising affluence of the middle class, rising per capita income, rising disposable income. With all of that and rising middle class, the burgeoning middle class, people have extra disposable income. They want to try premium products. And I think I was listening when I was doing this research, I was listening to one of the interviews by Piccadilly Agro CEO, where he was saying a tagline like, people are shifting towards less consumption but quality consumption, and that is a trend for the single malt whiskies, right? And premiumization, when it comes to trying out new things, luxury consumption, if 2023 year is any indicator, it is really a guide path to what is coming ahead in Indian whiskey market and spirits market. For example, Rampur Signature Reserve was a brand that Radico Khaitan company launched in 2023. It was a special edition launch of just 400 bottles, which was priced at approximately $6,000 per bottle. That is 5 lakh Indian rupees. 400 bottles was sold out in no time. It was completely sold out within no time. So that is a kind of demand for luxury consumption in India. People are not just happy with the consumption of the existing brands. They want to try out new brands. They want to try out premium brands. They want to have the luxury consumption taste, when it comes to the spirits market. And this is clearly a trend that is driving the premiumization in India. And the average cost per bottle is increasing. If you see just 5 years back, it would have probably doubled. The average cost of alcohol consumption, cost of consumption, I'm talking about, per capita bottle cost would have gone up significantly because of the shift towards premiumization. Now, the second factor really that is driving the Indian whiskey market is the demographics. There is at least 10 to 12 million people expected to attain legal drinking age when it comes to India. That is, every year 10 to 12 million new population is attaining legal drinking age. That's a huge growth, right? Explosive growth. And roughly 70% of Indian population is less than 35 years of age. So the demographics is highly favoring, and the social strata is changing. The stigmas has gone off, and the strata has started accepting widely the social drinking norms. The more women working, more affluence, more urbanization, more people moving to the cities. All of this is changing the spirits market landscape and the ecosystem in India. And this has given rise to the 53% dominance of Indian single malt when it comes to the spirits industry. Now, 66% of the spirits sold in India are whiskies, 18% is brandy, 12% is rum, together accounting for 98% of the spirit sales in India. Now, what are the companies that are making these stellar brands out there? First, I'm going to delve into only the Indian companies that are making. I'm not going to talk about United Spirits or Diageo or Pernod here. I'm going to talk about only the Indian brands, right? The first one is Radico Khaitan, which is a company that has been in existence since many decades. Radico Khaitan, Khaitan is the chairman of this company. They sell brands to almost close to 102 countries in the world. Their famous single malt brand is Rampur. As I said a while back, Rampur Reserve, which was a special edition, 400 bottles that got sold off like hotcakes. Rampur is the best single malt brand out there from Radico Khaitan that constitutes almost 6 to 7% of India-made foreign liquor sales of Radico Khaitan. In 2024, Radico Khaitan's revenue increased 30% approximately to 4,100 crores around, and the profits increased 25% to 250 crores. It has a total market capitalization of less than $3 billion, that is around 21,000 crore market capitalization, and it's the largest India-based liquor brand out there in India. Rampur is growing around 143%, 180% close to since last couple of years, and is one of the best-selling Indian-based single malt brand out there in the world. The second company I'm talking about is Piccadilly Agro Industries, founded by Siddhartha Sharma. This has around a market cap of 8,000 crore, just around $1 billion. And Piccadilly Agro was founded in the foothills of Haryana. They have many distilleries out there. And they own the brand, the fastest selling whiskey brand, Indri. Indri it was launched just in 2021. As I said, since launch, it has already crossed 100,000 bottle mark in terms of sales. And Indri has been roughly growing at above 150%. It has grown at least a compounded annual growth rate of 500% since last couple of years, and it has been growing explosively, even faster than Rampur. Now, Piccadilly Agro has doubled their capacities in 2025, FY 2025, and they had a sales growth of around 25-30% in 2023, and profits quadrupled in the last 1 or 2 years. And Piccadilly Agro owned Indri is on high demand, due to which they are expanding the capacity, and they are expected to double their revenues in the next couple of years. They have close to 35% market share when it comes to single malt whiskey exports, and they have around 23% operating margin. Now, one thing we need to keep in mind is these are single malt whiskies are selling globally, and they have a huge premium when it comes to the selling price, average selling price. Due to this premiumization, their margins are much higher than global averages. For example, Piccadilly Agro has operating margins around 23 to 24% and is expected to maintain or probably go up even 1 or 2% from these levels. These are not normal margins for a liquor industries, especially spirits market, right? But Piccadilly Agro, Radico Khaitan are all dominating and showing that the shift to premiumization is increasing their margins. The third company is the distillery behind the brand Amrut. Amrut Distilleries, as the name says, was founded in 1948 by late Radhakrishna, and Amrut has been expanding too fast in the distillery industry. Right? They have the famous global Indian single malt, which is Amrut, which is branded Amrut. Amrut has other brands they have launched. For example, they won the best Indian whiskey rye in 2023, and Amrut also has all other arenas of brands. Now, when it comes to competitive advantages, what are those four things that I can think of to establish as a global as well as in India itself, right? First one is premiumization. We discussed this a lot. It's a rising affluence and all other things. More people are traveling, more people are, the Indian diaspora is increasing, with more people, affluent class increasing, people want to try new things, travel more. All of this is increasing the premiumization of spirits brands. The second one is deep distribution pockets. Now, India is a country where distribution makes a big difference when it comes to brand building and establishing the footprints. Now, all the Indian brands I spoke about, whether it is Radico Kaitan or Piccadilly Agro, these are all in existence since many decades. So they have wide distribution range into the deeper pockets of rural India even, and so they are able to capitalize on the opportunity. And in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities, it is a given that these guys have wide range of outlets out there. And the third factor, and when it comes to the foreign brands, it is difficult for them to break into these barriers of entry, what we can call it as. So this is precisely why, if you see, Diageo got into India through acquisition of United Spirits. They spent a lot to acquire United Spirit, which was actually a loss-making company then, and they have completed that acquisition so that they can get into the distribution reach. So that is one of the strategies that Pernod might do as well through some inorganic acquisition. They might go on to acquire a Radico or a Piccadilly probably in the future. Now, when it comes to the third competitive advantage, the rising disposable income, rising burgeoning middle class, and the typical story of an emerging nation like we had seen it in Japan, China, Korea, now India, it's replicating, right? Then the urbanization and economic prosperity is definitely driving huge sales for these brands. The fourth factor is high import tariffs or tax that is being burdened on the foreign brands when it comes to Indian spirits industry. It's a highly regulated and highly tariffed when it comes to selling foreign brands in India. So precisely why there is at least a 150% premium markup for a brand that is sold by like a Glenlivet or other foreign brands that is being sold in India. So which is kind of prohibitive when it comes to the consumption for Indian people. Not that they will stop or think twice, but when there are competing brands from Indian brands which are on quality the same standards, as I said, as the CEO of Piccadilly said, less consumption but more better quality, people might opt for the Indian brands because it's slightly price-wise slightly better. So high import tariffs is definitely prohibitive, but it is getting kind of ironed out because there are new settlements that are coming out where the tariffs are getting reduced. So overall, there are 3 to 4 big competitive advantage when it comes to Indian spirits industry and especially the whiskey industry. So these brands are going to dominate for foreseeable future. So what are the risks? Some of the risks that is, outweighing, the Indian whiskey industry and the brands that we spoke about from an investment angle. First one is Indian liquor industry is a highly regulated industry. There are states that can ban liquor just like that. There could be law or taxes that can come in as a tariffs or barriers for, the sales of liquor in India. It's a very regulated industry, so there is always a sword that is hanging out there. Second risk is competitive pressure in the global arena. Now today these brands are making waves, but tomorrow there could be other countries that can bring its own liquors. Like Japan, for example, has many leading whiskey brands. Now there could be the incumbents like the Pernods or the Diageos who can launch their own brands that can compete against the Indian brands. Now the third one could be inflation pressure. When it comes to recession, people always becomes cost conscious and they can go into the non-premium category. So that is one, when the cycle turns, it has a cyclical effect when it comes to conspicuous consumption. And finally, tax burdens, as I said, could come in many forms towards the liquor industry or tobacco industry, because these are industries that are always alluring when it comes to putting tax burden by the governments. Overall, to conclude, Indian single malt whiskey is taking the global stage and the growth is just exploding. It is just the beginning. There could be many new whiskey brands. There could be many new single malt brands. There could be even many new other drink category brands like Kamikar I spoke about from Amrut distilleries that could go and dominate the global arena. To put it in a very, very single line way, there is huge market potential for the Indian brands across categories to rule and dominate in the foreseeable future. And India as a country, India as a domestic market itself is so big that there is so much headroom for growth, and with brands capturing the global arena, the potential for these brands and for these companies to grow is immense. Now, before I conclude, I have a vested interest in one of the companies I spoke about, which is Piccadilly Agro, and that's a disclosure I want to make before I conclude. Signing off, Sandeep Anand from Game of Investing podcast.